welcome to the first proper episode of Hopinions, and welcome back to those who listened to the pilot episode. My name's Steve, and with me, as is always going to be now, is Martin. Martin, welcome.
Hi, Steve.
Each week, Martin and I will be chatting about what's going on in the industry, sharing our opinions, and of course, enjoying a beer or two, which is where we're going to start this week, actually. I think we're going to crack straight into a beer. And the reason we're doing this straight away is because we're going to tackle 3 beers this week while talking about things. As you can hear, the can opening. This week's first beer is from Cigar City. It's called Invasion, and it's a 5% pale ale. Reason why we're cracking on with this straight away as the first beer is because recently I was on holiday in the States and happened across Cigar City in the local supermarket. Was absolutely blown away by this beer being my first beer in the States that I had, and was absolutely blown away by the freshness, and I couldn't wait to bring it back and to drink it on the show with you, mate. So let's tuck into this straight away and let's quench the thirst.
Okay, cheers. Well, to be honest, I could smell that as soon as you opened it and started pouring it. It's got a powerful aroma.
Yeah.
For a pale ale.
It just comes oozing out of the can straight away, doesn't it? I mean, it's just, for me, the thing that blew me away with it was, I think, for like most people, my experience, or I've had experiences of American beers that have maybe not tasted their best by the time they've got to these shores. And having opened this after a day's worth of travelling on my first evening in the States and drunk it, I was absolutely blown away by this beer. Being 5% and tasting like it tastes, to me, it's got the taste of a really powerful IPA.
Yeah, it has. It's got the aroma of a powerful IPA, but it's not got that same chewiness on it. It is very drinkable. Love the carbonation on it as well. It's not too fizzy, but it just hangs around. A little bit of a tingle on your tongue, but it is very good. For the benefit of everyone listening, I'm sipping mine. Steve isn't sipping his. It's almost gone.
It's because this became a real favourite of mine while I was in the States, and as a result of that, and just Twitter making the world a lot smaller, I actually managed to go along and visit Cigar City as well, and we've got a great interview coming up at the end of the show with Neil, who works for Cigar City, talks about the brewery, talks about their beers. And I would just like to say at this point that they looked after me very, very well while I was at the brewery. These beers, I did pay for them, but they were massively discounted. So I'm really grateful to the guys at Cigar City for letting me have a look around and letting me taste so many of their great beers. But make sure you hang around to the end of this week's show. So that kind of that's partly my beery adventure since the last episode that we did, since the pilot episode that we did. I've got some other little bits to talk about, but mate, I know you've been up to quite a few adventures while we've been off air.
Yeah, looking back on my Untapped, it does appear I have been a bit busy. One of the highlights of my beery calendar is the visit to the Harwich Redoubt Fort in Essex, which I think if I remember, you did join us before you went away. And that's more about the setting. It's one of those lovely places. It's an old fort which has been restored over the last 50 years by local people, and it's a lovely place. You pay a few quid to get in. Then they have a bit of a novelty factor. Bring your own tankard, and you get half a pint free. But it is about the atmosphere there. There were some lovely beers. A couple of the beers from Great Heck were definitely right up there, as they always are for me. They were very nice, but it is about the venue. I followed that up with a visit to the Great British Beer Festival at Olympia. It was on a Saturday, so you are slightly lacking in a bit of choice sometimes. But I did manage to get hold of some very nice beers. The highlight of which was the Vocation Chop and Change Cascade on cask. Very, very nice that was. Really, really enjoyed that. And a bit of a gripe of mine, if anyone who follows me on Twitter, lack of water. There seems to be a distinct lack of water available at GBBF and a few other camera festivals I've been to recently. I'm hoping that will change as we come into the 21st century with camera. Following day, London Craft Beer Festival, hit that one up. Again, very busy like it has been in the past, went on the Sunday. Had some really good beers while I was there. I'm still not a massive fan of the 90ml pours and the all day music, but I did get respite from that by going to the Fuller's Cask Bar, which was fantastic, really chilled, music in the background, and a fantastic range of cask beers. Actually, that was really good. And
I was quite jealous following your check-ins on that particular day.
Yeah, there was some nice beers. I mean, I got to try the Fuller's Vintage 2016 on cask both on the Saturday at GBBF and at the LCBF. Really nice drinking that fresh as well. Thinking, right, got to get some bottles, got to put it away. It's got to appear in the 12 beers of Christmas at some point in the future. But since then, a few beers. One of the other highlights I had was the Brew by Numbers 5502 Deeper, the second version. That was as good as the first one, I thought. Really enjoyed that. And at home, I've had, like a lot of people, the Cloudwater Deeper 6 and 7.
Yep, I've managed to finally get my lips around those as well. This past weekend, a little bit behind the curve on that one, but I was too busy drinking all the amazing beers that I've got my hands on in the States.
All the American beers.
All the American beers, yeah.
Well, I mean, I think a lot of people have tried it now, and it seems to be coming out at V6. Seems to be the preferred of the two on this occasion. Well, what did you think, Steve?
I am very much in that camp. I really enjoyed the V6. For me, it was the more instantly drinkable of the two. But having chatted to Paul at Cloudwater during the Manchester Beer Week, that was their intention with it, because they brewed that beer specifically to take to the festival they were invited to in San Diego. So they wanted it to be able to stand up to its American cousins in terms of what it tasted like and what it felt like. I found, for me, that the V7 just felt a little bit ordinary in terms of, and I'm not, make it clear there that I'm not saying that a modern UK craft brewery have produced an ordinary double IPA, but I just think in terms of the double IPA releases that we've seen this year, I just thought version 7 just lacked anything exciting or new about it.
That's interesting, because I was more of a fan of 7. I know what you're saying about V6, but I found that the flavour and the aroma dropped away quite quickly. So I did agree it was quite drinkable straight away, but I don't think for me it didn't hold it as long. Whereas the V7 I thought had a bit more happening with it as I got into the beer.
Okay,
that's how I felt on that one. I would caveat that by saying that for me, I haven't tried V1, so V3 remains my favourite. But I think Cloudwater are going to struggle to top Three's Company this year anyway.
I think so. I think Three's Company is an incredible example of an IPA, because let's not, putting all style guidelines aside, on the label it said IPA.
Yes.
So that wasn't a double IPA. It was an incredibly drinkable beer, flavoursome to the very end. I think the other one that potentially pushes that is the recent Citra IPA as well.
Yeah.
Which at a much lower ABV is very much drinkable. It was fruity all the way through. It was just that was incredible. But again, Cloudwater was still innovating and still showing what they can do with beer at the moment, which is great for us, the consumers.
Oh, definitely. Although it does go to show where we are now with ABVs, where we're talking about Citra being lower and almost sessionable at 6.5%.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think, I mean, a few years ago, someone said, you'll like this one. It's a good session beer, 6.5%. I would have looked at them a little bit odd. So, were there any other good beers apart from this one, which we've almost finished, the Invasion Pale Ale from Cigar City, that you really enjoyed while you were away?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple more Cigar City ones that we're going to do tonight, which had become staples in my fridge in the States. Other ones to mention, I was a little bit blown away, and I had probably an epiphany walking into the supermarket on the first evening and looking in the fridge and seeing Dogfish Head 60-minute IPA and 90-minute IPA on the shelf, for something like $2.19. And I was like, oh my God, all my Christmases have come at once. I spent $50 in the supermarket the first night I was there on beer alone. So the Dogfish Head beers were good. There was one that they've just released called Flesh and Blood, which was a fruit IPA. It had lemon and lime and orange in it. That was incredibly drinkable. And for me, it was just that ability to be able to drink American beer fresh and to taste it how the breweries intended it to be tasted, rather than the sticky mess that we sometimes end up with by the time it's found its way to the UK and got to the shelves and eventually made it into our fridges.
Yeah, well, it'll be interesting to hear what Cigar City have got to say on that matter in your interview as well.
Yeah, and they do talk about the concept of freshness. I was lucky enough to get to taste the beer that we're going to be drinking next, Alai, straight from the FV. Due to be canned the following day. You can't get much fresher than that, and it was tasting pretty incredible. So we've almost finished this one. Shall we jump into the next beer, and then we'll have a chat about what news we've had?
I think that's an excellent idea.
This is Alai. This is 7.4% IPA, so sits at the strength of the god of all beers, Cannonball. I'm interested to hear your thoughts on this one.
Okay. Cheers.
It's quite tropical on the nose.
Very tropical on the palate.
There's all sorts of flavours going on in there, isn't there?
It's a fruit cocktail.
Yeah. So it's got body to it. There's just loads of fruit going around in there. Loads of character to it. It's got this lovely lasting bitterness as well.
Yeah, it's a lovely bit of dryness to it as well. But it's not sweet or cloying. In that respect.
No.
So it's got the fruit flavours without it being sweet and cloying. It pours really nicely. Lovely little, fingernails worth of head. It's very, very tasty, this. Yeah,
I mean, like I say, again, just one of those beers that I drank and I was like, oh my word. And I do remember before I went, Matt Curtis saying, wait until you get your lips around that. You'll never look back. And Matt was absolutely bang on with that prediction, because
it's easily as drinkable as a Cannonball. It's got those similar sort of qualities. I mean, it doesn't taste like 7.4% either.
Mm-mm.
This hot day outside, 6-pack of these cold, wouldn't take long to do.
No, it wouldn't. You'd fly through it.
Yeah. No, that is really nice. So you'd better do the news really quickly before I finish it.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so a few things in this week's news then. So probably the biggest news of the last couple of days is Beavertown finally announcing a core IPA. So Lupuloid IPA, 6.7% ABV. It is their first straight up IPA. This is the first time Beavertown have done an IPA. They've learned a lot from collaborations that they've done in putting this together, and a lot of people will also remember the series that they did earlier on in the year called The Invasion of the Lupuloids, where they played around with the flavours and the malt bill and the ingredients to just tone the thing in. And eventually they put out 10 IPAs before they came to this one and settled on this one. So Lupuloid IPA now available in what can only be described as the funkiest craft can you're ever likely to see. It's a lovely little fetching pink and green number. While we're talking about new canned beers, 5 Points have released their new pills in can, an initial limited run of it. There will be more of this coming in the future. So currently available on eBrea if people want to get their hands on some of that. Fuller's have won an award. They've won a silver medal for their Frontier Craft Lager at the International Beer Challenge. And then we've just got just to finish with some news about some new venues opening up. So the Craft Beer Co are adding to their portfolio. They're adding another bar in London, Craft Beer Co E14, which will be at Limehouse, due to open in October. And then finally, for those of you that remember the short-lived adventure in The Angel by Brewdog, Dog Eat Dog, they've now changed that into something else. It's now called Punk Kitchen, which is going to be a new monthly pop-up hotspot and we'll feature some of the biggest, baddest and downright awesome dishes from all over the city, as well as 10 craft-fueled Brewdog beer taps. And yes, I did read that straight from the press release.
I'm very glad it's not your own words.
Yeah, because I wouldn't really use those. So that's really, there's obviously been quite a lot of news since we recorded the pilot of this, but just trying to keep things up to date in terms of where we're at with things that are going on. So, how are you finding the beer?
I'm loving this. This is such a good beer. But you've already told me, even before the interview, I can't really get hold of it over here.
You can't.
So I love you and hate you in equal measure right now.
I didn't want to come home because the beer just tasted so good out there. It just tasted so fresh. And a lot of people said that, once you've tried American beer fresh, there's never any going back. And I was like, no. And here I am now bestowing the virtues. But that's very much the driver behind this week's Opinions discussion. It's about freshness, but it's also about breweries being a little bit more open in terms of displaying things like canned on or bottled on dates on their packaging, as well as having the best before date on there. So that's the question we put out to Twitter this week. We asked them, should breweries include bottled or canned on dates as well as best before dates? And we got quite a few responses back. We had over 200 responses in favour of yes, we would like to see more of that from breweries on their packaging, and just a few comments that a few people have given us before we actually get into this discussion, mate. So Lou on Brew, great to see some of the old Beer O'Clock listeners still supporting the new Opinions. Bottled on gives a measure of freshness, best before gives expiration. Best of both perspectives, using both the drinker can make an informed decision when or if to drink. Katrina says, bottled on dates lets me know how old all of my imperial stouts and lambics actually are. I ignore the best before date on those. And that's a comment that was echoed by Mark at Kelfired as well. Miles Lambert, would be invaluable information in my mind. I'm against over-regulation, but volunteering that info would mean a lot to drinkers, which I think is a fair point. And then Sam Congdon, at Green Army Sam. Now, Sam didn't want just one tweet, he had 3. I don't think we'll ever get a uniform best before period agreed, so bottled on allows the consumer to understand the age. Although consumer super fresh obsession is worrying, especially with dippers. You don't need to drink them within a week. Definitely been a few that have had specific release events dates that maybe could have had more time to condition as well. So that's what people are saying generally about the labelling info. What's your thoughts on this one, mate?
I'm very much in favour of the letting us know when they put it into whatever vessel they choose to sell us in. So whether it be can or bottle, I'd like to know. I mean, coincidentally, while the poll was running, I popped over to my local co-op to buy some beers for some friends and family coming over at the weekend. I had a choice between a couple of breweries that I like both the beers from, but one of them had the best before date of July 17 and one of them had the best before of January 17, which makes me think that beer's been in the bottle now for at least 6 to 7 months.
Easily, yeah.
And the beer in question is a single hop beer, and I thought, I'm not so sure how well that's going to be sitting now on the top shelf near the lights. I'll give that one a miss. Whereas if I had ignored the best before date and had a bottled on date, I'd maybe make a different opinion. The same goes for Katrina's point about lambics and impy stouts. I think a lot of people do ignore the best before dates anyway. I would see a lot of value in them doing it. I'm not sure if there's a reason not to. I don't know if there's a logistical reason, a cost reason, if there's a reason for retailers, whether that be bottle shops, off licenses, supermarkets, pubs, bars, but they don't want it to advertise it. That I'm unsure of, because maybe people would say, oh, well, I'm supposed to drink this within, going back to Sam's message, within a week. Mm-hmm. And Sam's probably got a good point there that there is a certain amount of hype around some of the double IPA releases, especially in 2016, about how quick you're supposed to have it. And a few people have commented in the past that perhaps a little while longer, perhaps in the FE or in the bottle, would have benefited it. So I think there is but again, you would better make your own choice and your own decision based on the information presented to you. And for the people who don't care, it doesn't matter.
Yeah,
they can ignore it.
Absolutely. I think it's a great point you make there about the information being readily available on the label, because I mean there are two breweries that instantly leap to mind. I know Buxton, that they do bottled on and best before on all of their beers, but they also include the words drink fresh if it's a hoppy beer that's intended to be drunk as soon as possible. And I know Cloudwater do bottled on dates. They used to do best before dates, but they've stopped doing that now, I understand, and they only now have bottled on dates on there, because again, for that very reason, they were finding that suppliers didn't want to stock beers that only had like a 3-month shelf life to them because they couldn't shift them, basically, which I think is a tough one for us as consumers that maybe are looking for fresh beers. But I mean, I listened to the Beer Nomicon podcast, which is rapidly becoming one of my favourite beer podcasts.
Yeah, I'll second that. There, if you guys haven't listened to that one, it's worth downloading one of the episodes. Definitely worth it. If nothing else, the Cloudwater one, which is the most recent.
Yeah, that's where that's where I was pulling that information from that Paul was saying there about the importance of freshness to them, and they want to be able to present their beers to the public how they intended to present them. But I suppose much like yourself, I've been in situations before where I've bought beers online and they've turned up and they're either out of date or they were bottled so long ago that you don't want to touch them. Especially, again, coming back to the beers we're drinking tonight, American beers, it's so difficult to judge and to gauge when they were bottled, because sometimes you don't know what they've put on the bottle. Is that a bottled on or is that a best before? Which one am I actually looking at? And I just think anything that gives the consumer as much information that they need to be able to make an informed purchase. Fair enough, you can't do that if you're shopping online. You can't pick the bottle up off the shelf and have a look at the dates. But if you're in a bottle shop, you can do that. You can have a look, and let's be honest, any bottle shop worth its salts these days isn't going to be stocking out of date beers.
No, and most bottle shops don't have massive stocks of each beer a lot of the time anyway, especially for the new one-off limited releases. They tend to have a fairly low amount of it in. They try to gauge how much can I sell versus the amount of time I should have it anyway, the really good ones. But I mean, going back to your comment about, when you're getting beers delivered online, that was probably one of my first experiences. It wasn't a great one, and it's from a company I do implicitly trust these days, who sent a case of beer which had been ordered for me, and it was US beer from one particular brewery. Heard a lot of good stuff about them. I would say over half of them were already past the best before, and unfortunately their customer services did let them down that time, because when someone rang up to check, and they said, well, they'll all be okay still. But that sort of implies I'd have to drink them sooner rather than later as well. I like to be able to choose which beers I want to drink when I want to drink them, not because I've got a case of either out-of-date or almost out-of-date beers. And again, but if there's a few of the, say, bigger beers in there and a few of, say, maybe the darker beers, I might think, actually, that's fine. Mm-hmm. I can park those. So when the new releases come out, it's fine. I don't feel obliged to get through them. I can just have them. So I think there would be a lot of merit to doing it, and it would appear from the opinions of the votes we got, but there's a lot of support for that as well. Were there any other comments that came out, Steve? There
was a whole discussion between Nate Dogg and Doody about retailers and people not stocking for fear of the beers actually not selling if they've got too much information on, which people can, if you go to the show notes, you can click on the bit about the opinions poll, and that'll take you to the original tweet, and then you can read all the other tweets underneath if you've got time and if you want to do so. There was, again, around the retailing issues, Joe Tyndall at Fatal Glass was saying it allows consumers to decide whether they're happy with freshness for themselves, but retailers don't like short best before dates. And then we had a view from a brewer as well. So Mad Hatter Angus at Angus Brews. In an ideal world, yes, but having labels printed for each bottling run would be very hard for smaller breweries, which is quite a good point. You know, there's obviously costs that we're not considering for smaller breweries. And again, you know, I suppose you can go back to the early days of the Colonel when everything was kind of hand stamped on their labels.
But even a month, which it's bottled or canned, would be better than a lot of the information we have now. So I'm not saying that is that much more cost effective, but maybe there's some leeway there where I don't need the minute, hour, date necessarily.
Yeah.
But even the month would be handy when I'm making a judgment about what am I having next, out to the fridge or out to the cellar. So perhaps there's options there, but it's a good point, especially for the smaller brewer, and we do have a lot of smaller brewers around at the moment.
Absolutely, and I mean the point you're saying there again goes back to the interview that you can listen to at the end. Cigar City, they were saying 90 days on all of their beers that go out of the brewery. That's what they want them to be drunk in, unless they're a big dark beer that again you can age a little bit. So, and on that note, we're going to just crack into the third beer this evening before we just kind of finish up this week's opinions discussion. Now, this is again kind of on the freshness discussion, but an interesting twist. So this is again Alai that we're drinking here, but this is as an IPA. This has been aged on white oak. So I'm quite interested to see what you think of this, because I again got to try this when I was at the brewery. They kindly gave me a side-by-side tasting with the original Alai. So have a little taste of that and see what you think of that. Cheers. So again, it's the aromas are there, but they're softened a little bit.
Someone's dialed it down a bit.
Yeah.
It's reminding me of a Chardonnay.
Okay. There's some coconut in there. There's a little bit of sherbet going on for me. A little bit of lemon sherbet maybe.
I'm getting the oak though.
Yeah, it's coming through. You're still getting the IPA in there, but it's all just kind of softened and just dialed back a little bit.
I think I need to have a few more sips, but I'm not sure at the moment. But like I said, it reminds me a bit of a Chardonnay, especially when Chardonnay was going through its very 90s populist phase, when wine producers were just throwing oak chips at left, right and centre. So, well, I'll come back to that. I'll come back to that one.
Okay. So while we're talking about freshness, I suppose, and what we put on the labels, just a few other comments from Twitter. So, and this was a great one, and I'm actually quite glad somebody made this observation. So, Decos at Decos, Budweiser leading the way with born on dates. That's all he threw in there, but you can't really argue with that. Budweiser have been doing it for a few years now. In terms of putting born on dates and best before dates on all of their beers. Yeah. So say what you like about AB InBev and the beer itself and whether it's any good, but actually they are displaying when the beer was made and how long it's been in the bottle. And just coming on to freshness as well. So again, a lot of people saying what we've already said in terms of, and this is probably one of my view on this as well, is particularly with a light hoppy beer, I do want to be drinking it fresh. I want to be drinking it as fresh as I possibly can. I want to get as much flavour as I can out of all of those ingredients that have gone in there. I don't want to be letting it age and sit around. That's what dark beers are for. What do you think about this issue of, is it important to drink a beer as soon as it's released?
I mean, I feel like I've got a foot in both camps on this one. I have found myself, the further down the craft beer rabbit hole I've gone, buying into this whole you must drink it fresh kind of thing. But there's this it may be a cynical side to me, but I'm also got this bit about going on in my head saying, is that truly the best way to drink it, or am I just being told that's the best way to drink it because it shifts a whole lot of beer very quickly? It makes your stock, to coin a phrase, very liquid because you're getting a lot of cash return in a very short space of time. But I do find that, having tried a few beers where I've left it for a little while longer and revisited, I think I revisited V3 a few times, but a couple of months down the line, it wasn't tasting as good.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong, it tasted good, and if I hadn't tasted it fresh, I would have thought it was fantastic, but I had something to compare it to. So I probably would agree to a point, but there is a part of me which thinks there is an element of hype.
I think so, and I think the brewers have put a lot of work into making that beer as fresh and as good as it can possibly be, and they want to get it into your hands quickly. I think, like you say, it's when it's rushed out for the sake of hype, and maybe not quite ready, and maybe could do with a couple more weeks sat in the bottle or the can or the FV just to condition a little bit more. I think we're almost beginning to move into that nature of hype discussion, which again the guys on Beernomicon covered on a show as well. And I'm sounding like a massive fanboy at the moment, but I've really bought into what those guys are doing with their podcast at the moment. I'm really enjoying listening to it, so it's worth giving it a go. But for me, I think, I suppose, just to wrap up this conversation, personally, I would like to see when the date on the can or the bottle when it was packaged.
Yeah, I would agree.
As well as a best before. I'll take or leave the best before. But I would love to see this beer was packaged on, so I know how fresh or which batch I've actually got of a particular beer in my hands.
Yeah, I would second that, definitely. And if the more people that start to do that, I think the better it will be for us as consumers.
Absolutely, yeah. So if you're listening, breweries, we've spoken. You need to start putting packaged on dates on your beers as well. Thank you very much. Okay, so that brings us nicely on to this week's blog roundup. What have you got for us, Marty?
Okay, I've got a few that I've picked out. One is from someone which both Steve and myself know very well, and anyone who's listened to the Beer O'Clock show in the past will know as the random bloke from Twitter, Justin Mason. Completely and utterly bang on form with a piece about called The Moral High Ground, Shades of Grey, talking about big beer. And the gist of it, and it's definitely worth a read, and there will be a link in the show notes, is basically who are the bad boys these days. With a number of big beer companies, breweries buying up some of our favourite craft beers. Lagunitas, Goose Island spring to mind from the States. Over here, Camden and Meantime. Has it stopped us drinking the beers, or did we all have a bit of a gripe, bit of a grumble on Twitter, and then carry on buying them anyway, and really appreciate the fact that they're all in Wetherspoons these days? So it's a really good piece. Really enjoyed it, and it's definitely something which is probably worth revisiting in the future, I reckon.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. Yeah.
So thanks for that, Justin. Another one which struck me is from somebody who gets a second mention already.
Goodness me. It's like we've got serial fans already.
Exactly,
after just 2 shows.
Exactly. Well, we're telling him he's a fan by doing this.
Yeah, true.
Pete McKerry, under Brew Geekery. Oh, and just to say that Justin's, if you ever want to catch up on Justin's blog, it's Get Beer, Drink Beer. Again, Pete's done a very short piece, basically alluding to about SIBA, the Society for Independent Brewers, taking ownership of craft beer and effectively having a craft beer accreditation. Well worth a read. Just a few paragraphs, won't take too long, but definitely food for thought. Also mentions back to the very short-lived United Craft Brewers. That was, initially going to be the organisation that would take up the craft mantle. So that's definitely worth a punt, especially bearing in mind, recent news about the beer bloggers pitching with BeerX and SIBA. So it's well worth some thought, and it'd be interesting to hear what people think about it at some point.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's one that we've not specifically covered on the news, because I think there's going to be more to come from this.
I think it's got legs.
Yeah, so it's one that we might revisit in a future episode of the show.
Definitely. And again, another one, and this one is quite a long one, and it's from Mark Johnson at Beer Compugation, and it's basically a follow-up to one he did a couple of years ago, effectively called Everything Wrong with Beer. I like Mark's writing. It can be very direct, but just a couple of bits, just a couple of the headlines which I did quite like. One was about camera bashing, Weatherspoons bashing, Brewdog bashing. Some very good comments in there. Another one was about everything was boring before and everything is so different and varied now, which I quite liked. Freshness. He's got an over freshness. I want to lick the hops before they go into the brew. I especially liked that sentence.
Ties in very nicely with the theme of this week's show.
Exactly, with the question, is this shit even conditioned yet? So I think that if anyone wants to have a read of that one, they really take a little bit of time. It's worth persisting with, and I think you will really, really enjoy it. You won't agree with all of it. I certainly didn't, but it definitely makes you sit back and think. And if nothing else, it is bloody entertaining.
Yeah.
So Mark, thank you ever so much for that one.
All of those blogs will be linked through in the show notes, so you can link through directly to read them. Now, a new segment for this show. We didn't do this in the pilot, but we did allude to the fact that it was coming, and a little bit weird as well, because I've had to relinquish control. So,
which anyone who knows Steve isn't the easiest thing for him.
Long-term listeners of the Beer O'Clock Show will know that how much joy I used to have giving away a great big box of nothing every week in the Prizeless Prize. So we thought we'd continue that tradition on Hopinions, but I'm actually handing over the choosing of the prize each week to Martin. So who wins this week's great big box, inaugural great big box of nothing, mate?
Okay, well thanks Steve. I'm actually going to give a bit of a shout out to a few of the ones which I actually really liked.
Me?
No.
None of mine?
None of yours.
Damn it.
Basically I deleted all yours.
Oh.
Sorry. There was 5 on here which caught my eye, and all for different reasons. So the first one which caught my eye was from Sparky Wright, which was basically just a picture of all the beers he got delivered on one day, which is about 30 of them, and half of them look like they come from Odyssey. So I like that one. Another one which appealed to me was from World of Waltcraft, and it appealed to me because of my football side of me, because it's a can in front of transfer deadline day from Sky Sports News.
Nice.
Next one was from Gammon Baron, a picture taken of a very lovely looking dark beer at Northern Monk Refectory, which anyone who's been there will know what a lovely space that is. A previous winner as well, Plimshawn from Bird in the Hand in Housestead in his pub. He's taken a very, very nice picture of the Peacher Man, the peach cobbler wit from Beavertown, which I'm yet to try myself. And then lastly, again, another shout out for Justin. He's just taken a picture of 3 pumps on one of his local pubs, consisting of Adams Broadside, London Pride and Sharps Atlantic. Just very shiny, very colourful. However, despite all the colour, I have decided that the winner for the inaugural Prizeless Prize is Gammon Baron for his picture of a beer in the Northern Monk Refectory.
Good luck. Well, congratulations first of all to Gammon Baron for winning the first Hopinions Great Big Box of Nothing. And good luck avoiding selecting his pictures every week, because he does do some amazing pictures as well. So that will be linked through to in the show notes as well. And if you want to have a go at entering your own picture in the Prizeless Prize, put a picture on Instagram. You can use the hashtag Prizeless Prize, but that's not what we look for. You have to use the hashtag Cheers Guys. That's the one that Martin will be looking for. If you don't use the hashtag, you're not in with a shout. So put your picture up, use Cheers Guys, and hopefully you might win the next show's Great Big Box of Nothing. So, any final thoughts on the oak-aged Alai?
Not as good as the original Alai for me. I'm struggling with the oak flavour in it.
There's a lot going on there in terms of the flavour, the complexity. It makes it a lot sharper. It has softened the other flavours that are in there. They're still there in my mind, but it's not as pronounced as the original.
Yeah, what percentage is this one? Is
Again,
it different?
No, it's same percentage, 7.4%. So comes out at the same.
Yeah, I mean it's nice, but having had the original Dry Life first of all, I think they should have just left well alone.
Yeah, 7.5%. I think they both are actually. I've been calling them 7.5%. That's because I am obsessed with Cannonball, obviously.
And they have put it in a green can.
They have put it in a green can, which completely confused me. Or made it easier. I just go for the green can in the fridge every time. Brilliant. Okay, so just to round up this week's show, then, I've really enjoyed getting into our first sort of meaty subject. We'll be putting those polls up on Twitter every Sunday night. That's how you'll be able to get involved with these discussions. Make comments, vote, get involved. Might read out your comments, share your opinions on the next show. We'll be talking more opinions soon, and in the meantime you can find us at Beer O'Clock Show on Twitter, Instagram and Facebook. You can also find me on Untapped at Beer Show Steve. Martin, where can people find you online?
Twitter, Untapped and Instagram. Beer is the answer should be your way to find what I've been up to beer wise.
Okay, and just to finish off, we're pleased to say that Opinions are still able to bring you discounts from Owls by Mail, Beer Merchants, Ebria and Hot Burns and Black, and you can check out those at beeroclockshow.co.uk/discount. And also, just to finish with, we are currently selling limited edition Opinions t-shirts online. They're only £13. They're available in a range of wonderful colours, and for your £13 you will get a limited edition t-shirt with our wonderful logo emblazoned on the front of it, so you can wear a piece of history as well. And that just about wraps it up for this week, mate. So until next time, cheers folks.
Cheers.
I'm here at Cigar City Brewing in Tampa, chatting to Neil from the brewery. Neil, welcome to the show. Let's start with some obvious questions. First of all, on your website, your opening line in the About Us section is "in a state known for theme parks." That's how I came to be here, because I'm visiting with the family. How important is that to you as a brewery? Does that bring in a lot of custom that people are here visiting the theme parks?
The theme parks help, certainly, but there's a lot that brings people to Florida outside of the theme parks. They certainly help, though. We've always been a tourist state, and the fact that those tourists do come in, and that obviously craft beer is exploding in the US, the UK, and elsewhere, it certainly helps bring people into the tasting room. At the end of the day, it's not the reason why we've ended up in Florida. Our founder, CEO, Joey Redner, is a fifth-generation Florida native. He's lived in Tampa his whole life. When he started his brewery, he said, I think we're an underdeveloped market, and I think that we have something to say in the world of craft beer that's unique. So that's sort of why we started here. I showed you around the brewery earlier. The place where we brewed our first batch of beer is about 10 feet away, and we still brew there to this day. So kind of being from Tampa and being from Florida, it's always been an integral part of our brand and of our brewery. Mm-hmm. The fact that we get millions of tourists from all over the world certainly helps. Told you earlier as well, we're the second biggest craft brewery in the state of Florida. So if you're into beer and you're in Florida, just like yourself, it does bring a lot of people in, which is a good thing for us.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned there about the importance of the heritage back to the area, back to Tampa. Tell us a little bit about how the brand came to be, the name Cigar City, the link back to the heritage here. How did that come about?
Sure. Like I said, Joey is a fifth-generation Florida native. He's lived his whole life in Tampa. Tampa has a really rich history that ties into cigar manufacturing. Late 1800s, early 1900s, there's a guy named Vicente Ebor who founded Ybor City. It's just to the east of us. Dozens and dozens of cigar manufacturers set up shop around Ybor. Late 1800s and early 1900s specifically. Before the Cuban Revolution, Tampa was the biggest purchaser of Cuban-made tobacco in the world. So it was known as the unofficial cigar capital of the world, hence the name Cigar City. And outside of the name of the brewery, even the names of the brands are almost universally tied into the state of Florida or to Tampa history or cigar history. Alai being our flagship beer, it's a game that originated in Spain, but Florida is one of the few places in the world that they still have Alai. There used to be a Alai arena just down the road, actually. If you drive up and down I-75, it's kind of the north-south thoroughfare in the state of Florida, you'll see signs, Alai exit such and such, because they still play Alai. It's still prominent in Florida. Yeah. Maduro Brown Ale. That's like I said earlier, the first beer that we ever brewed. It's a reference to a dark wrapper on a cigar reference in turn being a Cigar City reference. So the state of Florida and its cigar making history really is tied into every aspect of the brewery.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and you, as you mentioned, you took us on a little look around the brewery, which I'm really grateful for, thank you. And as you was doing that, you was explaining about what seems to be quite a rapid expansion from 2009, when you started in quite a small facility, to where we are now in 2016, where you seem to inhabit the whole of this industrial unit. What's that been like for the brewery, that expansion?
It's been exhausting, certainly. We're very fortunate that people love our beer. We're very, very fortunate. We've always brewed the beer that we like, and we're lucky that people enjoy drinking our beer as well. So it's been a matter of trying to keep up with demand, which is certainly a good spot to be in, beats the alternative. But at the same time, we've taken the approach that we're going to expand, we're going to try and make as much beer as we can, and then we'll kind of figure it out in behind. Earlier we walked by some fooders. Same approach that we took to those fooders, which was, well, we don't know what we're going to do with them, but let's buy them, is the approach we've taken with a lot of things around the brewery. We don't know how we're going to put beer in these fermenters, but let's buy the fermenters and let's try and keep up with demand.
Yeah.
So it's been a lot of playing catch up, and like I said, that can be exhausting, but at the same time, it's fun. There's always something new happening, and we're always finding new ways to make more beer and make more interesting beer.
Mm-hmm. And tell us a little bit about, again, you've mentioned Alai a couple of times as being the best seller of yours, and on the tour you were saying it accounts for quite a lot of your production. Tell us a bit about some of your core beers and what they're like, and the demand that there is for them at the moment.
Sure. Alai is our flagship beer. It's a 7.5% American IPA. It's got 6 different hop varietals. It's our flagship beer, represents 60% of our production. So more than half of what we do is just make one beer, just make Alai. So that's sort of the beer that our brand has become associated with most closely. We do have the Maduro Brown Ale. That's the first beer we ever brewed. It's a Northern English style brown ale. I tend to think of it more as a brown porter.
Okay.
Malt forward, very full bodied, very chocolatey. It's got a little bit of oatmeal in the grist to give it some body and some sweetness, but only 5.5% alcohol. That's my favorite core beer that we do. Mm-hmm. We have a beer called Florida Cracker. That's our Belgian style wheat beer. That's our good kind of beach beer.
Okay, yeah.
Coriander, orange peel in that beer, light and refreshing. We have a newer beer that you were drinking earlier called Lager. It's just called Cigar City Lager. Not quite a Pilsner, not quite a Helles, a little more malt forward than a Pilsner, a little more restrained in bitterness than a Helles. That is quickly becoming our number 2 selling brand. We all like drinking crisp, clean, easy drinking beer. I think there's still a lot of folks who are out there that are used to drinking Budweiser and Miller and Coors, and this is a really good gateway beer for them to get into. Apart from that, we've got Invasion Pale Ale, and I sort of think of that as a beer that's got a lot of the good things of an American IPA, but in a more low alcohol, more easy drinking package.
Absolutely, I can only agree with you on that one. That's the one that's got me since I've been here, was the Invasion. As you said, it's got all of the flavours of a big hoppy IPA, but it's packed up in this lovely 5% really drinkable package. It's an incredible beer. Let's talk about kind of, I suppose, outside of America. Recently, you guys did a collaboration with Galway Bay in Ireland. What was that? What was that like, and how did that come about?
Well, myself and a few of the other people that work around the brewery I lived in Georgia for a little while. The guy who's currently the head brewer at Galway Bay is a guy named Will Avery, who used to brew at a brewery up in Georgia called Burnt Hickory. So they've got an American brewing with them over there. We love Will. We had been talking for a while. Hey, let's get together. Let's brew some beer together. So it really came out of a personal relationship. We sent Wayne over there a few weeks ago. So he had brewed 2 different beers, actually. He had brewed a beer that had, I think, 3 different strains of English ale yeast. We were looking into doing something with Brett. Will didn't want to put Brett in his brew house. So we brewed with a couple different English yeast strains that would kind of mimic those same kind of esters and phenols that came out. To be able to brew in Ireland, I know Wayne said that was one of his favorite trips, and to be able to hang out with our buddy Will was really the main impetus for the trip, for sure. Unfortunately, we won't be selling beer in the UK or in Ireland anytime soon, but it's still, there's value added when we send our brewmaster, when we send some of our staff out to these different international festivals. So we can at least get the name out there, and then hopefully sooner than later we'll be able to start sending beer out to some of the European and the UK markets.
Yes. So the decision not to send beer to the UK and Ireland, what drives that? Why not? Is it a freshness thing? Is it because you need to cater for your local market first and foremost?
Well, the two things you just hit on are really the main sticking points for us. Freshness has always been first and foremost for us. We date all of our cans. We want all of our cans consumed within 90 days. Same thing with our draft beer. The logistics of getting beer in a timely fashion over from the US to the UK is tricky. Cooperage is tricky. When we do send beer out to the UK or to Europe, we're sending those one-way kegs, either key kegs or pub kegs.
Yeah.
Those are pricey. And then the other issue is we're out of beer in Florida. It's a really good spot for us to be in, certainly. 98% of our beer stays in the state of Florida, but we still are out of beer in Florida. So does it make more sense for us to have to charge more and to have beer that might not be as fresh as we would like to be out in an international market? Or does it make more sense for us to get fresh beer out to our home state? So that's sort of the approach we've always taken. We want to be taking care of our home base before we kind of get out in the world a little bit more, certainly. But we're working on it. We're definitely working on it.
I mean, having been fortunate enough to experience the beers fresh, and to be sat here drinking a super fresh Alai that's just come straight out of the tank. Freshness is certainly a key thing, I think, in terms of getting your beers to the UK, because I think I'm probably not alone in saying that I've been unfortunate enough to have American beers that have been imported, have probably gone well past their best and have just basically taste like a sticky mess. What I've been drinking since I've been in Florida is just amazing, fresh, clean, all the aromas, all the flavours are in there, and why would you want to send that anywhere and have it taste different? That you mentioned about the decision to put dates on the cans and on your packaging. What was the impetus behind that?
Fresh beer is important. Freshness makes a world of difference on our beer and on beer in general. We want to make sure that the beer, wherever in the world you're drinking it, is as fresh and as tasty as it would be if you were drinking it like you were, just straight off of the tank. So some breweries use either a Julian date or they use kind of a proprietary dating system. For us, we want to be as transparent and as upfront as possible. We say on our website, we say actually on the can, please drink fresh, do not age. So we're really trying to get out in front of people and explain how important freshness is, and we want to make it as clear as possible how old the beer that you're drinking is. We're not using a best buy date, because that can also be kind of, it obscures exactly when the beer was packaged. We said this beer is packaged on, what's the day, the 18th? August 18th. You have 90 days to drink this beer, fresher the better, certainly. So it's been absolutely critical for us.
Yeah. And let's talk about the future of the brewery. You've recently entered into a partnership with Oscar Blues.
That's right.
What was the decision behind that? What does that now bring to Cigar City that wasn't there before?
Sure. Well, Joey, again, he's our founder and our CEO, has always been very debt averse. He says in his personal life and his professional life, I don't want to owe money to anybody. So we've essentially we've sourced all of our growth with actual cash on hand. We've actually cash flowed everything. We came to a point where we said, well, we've either got to look into buying a new brew house, which is in the millions of dollars, building a new facility, which is in the tens of millions of dollars, and how do we continue to grow? How do we continue to get more beer out to more people without going into debt? So Joey said, well, it's a partnership is really going to be the way to go. Oscar Blues, when we talk about freshness, when we talk about canning beer, we wouldn't be canning beer if it weren't for Oscar Blues. Those guys were really the pioneers in the world of canning craft beer in the U.S. So when an opportunity came up for a partnership with them, we jumped at the opportunity. We said, these guys, the cultures are very, very similar. They understand what we want to do. They understand our focus on quality, and they understand our focus on freshness and on cans. What this partnership allows us to do, they have excess capacity at some of their facilities. They have 3 breweries in the U.S., one in Colorado, one in North Carolina, and one in Texas. They have excess capacity. We have demand without capacity. So we're eventually going to be brewing some of our beer up specifically in North Carolina. It also allows us to leverage this partnership with raw materials and with distribution. So we're able to get better price and we're able to get better ingredients when we're buying for ourselves and Oscar Blues and a few of the other breweries that we're now partnered with, including it's Perrin out in Michigan and 2 breweries in Utah, it's Wasatch and Squatters. So when we're buying raw materials or when we're contracting for hops, we're doing it for the entire group, which allows us to leverage that buying power. We're able to get better prices and better ingredients. So far, it's really been a wonderful partnership, and it's going to allow us to grow without getting into debt.
Okay, well, that's great to hear that you're going to be able to do more of what you love. Mm-hmm. Okay, so final question then. Someone's just walked into the tap room. What beer are you going to recommend that's on your board?
Oh, a time and a place for everything, certainly. I would recommend what I've been drinking lately is the same thing I recommended to you and to Emma. The newer beer, the lager. Crisp, clean, easy drinking, 4.5% alcohol, which is certainly a selling point to me. Mm-hmm. When the brewers and our staff get off of work, they sit down at the bar, they're drinking lager. Low alcohol, really nice hop character. It's 100% Hallertauer Mittelfrüh hops. Crisp, herbal, very easy drinking. That's been my go-to. Other than that, I'll never turn down some of our big imperial stouts. Hunapoo is probably, aside from Alai, the beer we're best known for. It's a huge Russian imperial stout. It's got 2 types of chili peppers, cinnamon, vanilla, cacao nibs. That's a seriously complex beer. Somebody puts a bottle in front of me, I wouldn't turn that beer down, certainly.
Brilliant. Listen, Neil, I really appreciate your time showing us around the brew house today. Thank you for that, and for sitting down and doing this interview. And I'm hoping our listeners have enjoyed this as well. So, cheers.
L'chaim. Absolutely, and thank you so much for coming by, and thank you for letting us talk a little bit about Florida, about our brewery, and hopefully we'll see some more of y'all from the UK down here in Florida.
Brilliant. Thank you very much.
Bring your sunscreen. It's very hot.
Yes.